Everybody, I'm here to refute the claim given by the advocate that was, since its introduction, the iPhone has and will continue to be the best mobile phone on the market. The supporting claims for this were simply the iPhone has the best sales of any one mobile phone. Second, the iPhone can do more than other mobile phones. And third, the iPhone has the best integration of hardware and software. I urge to reject this proposition simply because the proposition is too general. It fails to clarify the burden of proof and also the field of argument, which then undermines all of the supporting claims. There were also issues with the relevancy and sufficiency of the grounds throughout the argument, as I'll get into now. First, the iPhone has the best sales of any one mobile phone, was the supporting claim. We see the term best, which kind of denotes a claim of value, because best could be what market it's introduced in and for what group of people. The evidence proposed here is true. The sales for the iPhone are pretty good. However, the statistics for were a little bit misleading. It presented the sales for the BlackBerry phone, which, according to Forbes' top 10 smartphones, it doesn't even make the list. And actually, the BlackBerry as a platform only holds about 1% of the global market, as compared to the leading smartphone producers, which are Samsung and Apple iPhone. So the iPhone did have great sales. The statistics provided misled the competition a little bit. As far as the reasoning, the staggering statistic of all the total iPhone sales to date made by Apple is good. However, when you look at a larger scale found by statistics gathered by Gartner for the worldwide smartphone sales in 2013, we found that Samsung sold 299 million devices, which is 31% of the entire global market. Second is Apple with 150 million devices sold, total of 15%, and LG comes in the later third, holding only 4.8%. This only comes into play because we start to look at the iPhone sales as a whole, which then starts to look at the Apple company as a whole. That's the only phone they provide. But on that note, on the global scale, on that scale, it is not the leading in sales. The second supporting claim to refute is the iPhone can do more than other mobile phones. The first piece of evidence, or the evidence given, consisted of examples of apps. Some were not specifically stated, but the significance of the apps is a little bit irrelevant because those are produced by independent producers and then purchased by companies like Apple and Samsung. And that does not give credit to the 235,000 developers that produce apps for Apple. Also, the claim is that it does more than other mobile phones. However, there's the comparisons to other phones is lacking. It shows, one example is that of an app for the iPhone is that apps can translate written words via the camera into another language. This app being referenced is called WordLens, originally by Visual Quest and now owned by Google, and is actually available on the iOS platform for the iPhone and also on the Android platform for the rest of the market. And again, the statistics provided for this claim are also kind of one-sided. They fail to show the downloads and the revenue produced by other download application providers. For example, the Apple App Store did in fact bring in $10 billion worth of revenue in 2013, making up 18% of global application downloads. However, Google Play made up 75% of global application downloads for Android and Windows platforms. The third supporting claim was that the iPhone has the best integration of hardware and software. Again, we find the claim of value in the term best used in the proposition, and it makes it hard to understand the field of argument. We hear the integration of hardware and software, but the terms are not clearly defined, and again, we don't find a comparison between competitors' hardware and software in terms of performance, which you might expect. The examples or the grounds for this claim reference to iPhone and other sibling devices and their functions and uses in our society. And they are impressive. However, it starts to fall off of the topic, which is that the iPhone is the best mobile phone. We start to see evidence for different devices used to glorify the one iPhone. To conclude, I have no doubt that the iPhone made by Apple is an innovative device and is leading the way on a lot of the higher end devices. However, in this argument, we're not given a narrow proposition, a narrow focus for the field of argument, and we see some value in the claims. And there was issues with the grounds and reasoning to support the supporting claims. So I ask urge to reject this proposition. Thank you. Yeah.
2 minutes and 8 seconds over. Not that anybody's counting. All right, the structural stuff is fine. I like the idea that you have at the beginning where you basically say, we have a problem with the lack of clarity of the field of the argument. And that concerns the question of what's the standard for best that we're going to be dealing with. I think that's a good press to start with. That's a value claim. We don't know what the criteria for best is. And the only criteria that are provided are the 3 standards that the advocate presents. So, what's wrong with their argument when it comes to just those 3 standards? Let me tell you what's wrong with those arguments. Number one, they say it's the #1 selling platform, but it's not if you look at all total sales. And if you're looking at just one company, that's an unfair way of describing this. That's the problem with the argument that's being presented here. And you've got a good statistic that says that they represent 15% of the market as opposed to Samsung, which is twice as much. And the only reason Samsung isn't, individualized is because Samsung sells 50 different variations of their phones and Apple sells just one variation. So it's not a fair comparison to begin with. And if we look at the more general comparison, the premise of the advocate's argument here is wrong. Second, when we're talking about the apps, this whole idea of evaluating the apps as a measurement of Apple is inaccurate because the apps are not developed by Apple and the iPhone. They're just sold on the iPhone platform. And are there any of these that are not sold on the comparable platforms? And the answer is, well, did the advocate provide any examples of those? Just the one that they mentioned, and you say, and that one, that's available at Google. So I don't know what they're talking about on this particular situation. And finally, when we're talking about the question of what constitutes best, we're back to that same issue. What's the standard of best? When it comes to the integration of these things, do these things work faster? Did he cite any evidence that they work faster? do they have fewer flaws or problems or freezing or any of those kinds of things? I don't know. And new iPhones, of course, are notorious for having weird things that people are freaking out about. By the way, you ought to mention that. Like, we got the bendable iPhone. Did you hear about that? The new one? Oh, yeah, they bend. They're not supposed to bend, but they do. Yeah. All right, so there are things to talk about there, but you're kind of overcomplicating it. Simplify the argument and say, on the standards that they provide for what's best, they don't even meet their own standard. Now you could also potentially present some counter standards too. That's not necessary, but I think you've got the right argument about, look, and I think the one thing that's missing here, by the way, is an argument that says these are not the things that even determine what's best. Just because something sells a lot doesn't make it the best. Just because it's highly desirable, that may be because it's marketed effectively. Apple's got a great brand name and people like that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best. They're, especially if these phones have all the other apps, they work just as efficiently and fast. They are available in more on more providers, for instance, that sort of thing. I think Apple solved that problem a little bit because they did get more providers now. But once upon a time, they started off, they were only available through the one phone system. And so I think there are a lot of ways that you can challenge that and broaden it. All right, I'm going to keep it as short as I can.